I have Bill Courtney in the studio with me today. And Bill, welcome to Friday Viewpoint.
You've more than known of me. You've sat on the sideline while I've screamed at your kids in basketball games or your grandkids.
I was just telling them that you coach my granddaughter, and she cried every game. But and she reminded me of that last week when she was here. She said, he made me cry every basketball game. And I'm a perfect person to interview you. So, listeners, if you're sitting there thinking, he's all about sports, there's probably not a female anywhere in America that loves sports or football better than I do. I can hardly wait every year until August rolls around and football starts again. So, I'm excited to have you on the program today.
I appreciate it. And I'm by no means all about sports either.
I know you're not, and we're going to talk about that today. But I did watch the documentary, and it was very interesting, and I could relate to it somewhat because my husband has the same background that you have. He grew up with no father and struggled. And, you know, one of the things that he's always told me, and it was clear in this documentary, and it's also clear in your book, he said, if I had been given everything in life, I would never have amounted to anything. I had to work
agree with that
and earn it.
More.
And he is not a big proponent of giveaway programs. And so I want to know, one of the things you said in your book, Bill, that just has really resonated with me, because I've said it to my children so many times when they would go through adversity. I'd say, well, adversity builds character, but that's not what you said, and you said it much better than me. It reveals character.
I think so, yeah.
And I've that has really resonated with me since I watched the documentary, and I've also read your book, which, by the way, is called Against the Grain. It's on the bestseller list, and you can buy it at booksellers, probably any bookstore here in Memphis.
You can buy it at booksellers. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble. You can go to CoachBillCourtney.com and click on the Amazon tab, or you can just go to Amazon. It's a national release. You can get it anywhere.
Well, I can understand how you got involved with an inner city school after reading your story, because you could relate to those young men.
That's
you
really
really
my
could.
reality.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because my husband and I have done inner city ministry, and almost, I would say, 95%, there's no father in the home. And you tell our listeners a little bit about your background, because a lot of them won't know that. So tell them how you were raised.
Well, first, a couple things you said. One is in Against the Grain, chapter 10. It's called The Dignity of Hard Work. And that speaks to what your husband was talking about, which I couldn't agree more. And I don't know if he's going to sit down and read the book, but he needs to read chapter 10. If he reads any chapter, he'll identify with it. Secondly, is the demographics around Manassas. There's 3 neighborhoods really that support the Manassas community, which is New Chicago, Greenlaw, and Smoky City. And the demographics, the actual scientific census demographics, is that only 12.5% of the households consist of a married couple, which speaks to exactly what you just said. How I grew up, my mom, who loved me and cared for me and did the best she could for me, and she and my father were divorced when I was 4. My father and I had almost very little contact, not much of a relationship. And, you know, my mom's 4th husband shot at me down a hallway. I had to dive out a window to save myself. And there were lots of challenges as a kid, but I had 2 very loving grandfathers, and I had a bunch of really good coaches and mentors coming up who were people that I could fall back on and were good illustrations of what life could look like for me. So, you know, it's not a sob story. It's just a reality.
Well, and let's speak to that. How important is a coach or a teacher in a child's life?
Well, very, but unfortunately, there's a segment of our society who has decided that when a child gets 5, it's now the school's responsibility, and they couldn't be more wrong. You know, bedtime stories, flashcards for your ABCs, and flashcards for arithmetic, and understanding a developing vocabulary and syntax and composition comes from bedtime stories. And when families aren't doing that for children in the homes, it doesn't matter what you do in schools, because they're just going to always be behind, and it doesn't make education and learning a priority. So that I think is most important. But then secondly, how important are mentors and coaches and teachers in schools? They're paramount, because their job is to then support the education and the love and the rearing that goes on in the home. And they can be an amazing support and not only something to support, but a different and consistent but different illustration of another way to think. And it's part of an education of a child is starting at home, then to teachers and mentors and coaches. And as a group, that should comprise 100% comprehension of a child's rearing. But when one or the other is absent, you should expect failure. And that's exactly what we get.
Well, and my husband shared with me several times, and he shared it in his testimony, when he was a youngster and he was sent to school, he was sent with no breakfast and he had no money for lunch. Mm-hmm. And teachers decided on their own, because he kept his head on his desk, he was only 5 years old, he was hungry, he was sleepy, that he was just a problem child. And he said, nobody knew what I lived like at home. And I think if teachers could look past that and begin to see there's a reason why this child is like this in kindergarten, instead of you're labeled, he said, from then on that you're not somebody that's interested in school. And unless you get a teacher that really takes an interest in you, or a coach like you did with those young men. Well,
no doubt. But what you also have to think about is from where your husband's world was and today, especially in our urban inner city schools, it's not one kid like that. It's the predominant numbers of kids
That's
like
true.
that. And when the predominant numbers of kids are hungry and they're not raised at home and they have no foundation for what education looks like, I think we're far too hard on the school system and the teachers. I don't think teachers get a teaching degree and go teach because they just want to join a teachers union and cruise. They're there because it's something that they passionately want to do, the vast majority of them. But over time, when you are fed year after year after year, entire classes of kids that education doesn't mean as much to, because it's not a focus at home, it's not supported at home, and nothing happens at home in order to support it, you end up just going through the motions because you feel like your efforts are futile. And that is a sad commentary on where our schools are today. But I am telling you, as a guy, I was a non-faculty volunteer person, but I spent every day for 6.5 years in these schools. When you don't even have textbooks for history class and you don't even have textbooks for algebra, and then you sit there and you want to hammer the school system for not educating, you need to look deeper and find out it's not the teacher's fault by and large. It's truly not. And I didn't think that until I got into the school system and understood it. But now that I do, it's tragic.
Well, and it's unfortunate, because when we've done inner city ministry, you work and you work and you work, and then they go home to the same environment, to the same problems, and they come back and it's like you start all over again. It's
no
like
doubt.
The whole week that you worked with them, or the whole day that you were with them, it just went away, because they go right back into what they came out of, and that's where their comfort zone is. That's their environment. That's what they know.
Well, and that's that's why we have to go against the grain. Frankly, we have got to go against the grain of what the politicians are saying. We have to go against the grain of what the pundits think. We have to go against the grain of thinking that dumping another $50 million into a failed system will help. And we have to understand that those that are the most blessed among us, it's not a nice thing to go into the school system. It's not a nice thing to go into the most impoverished areas of our city to try to exact some measure of change. I see it as a responsibility. And, when you drive over the viaduct at Warford,
I know exactly where that is.
All right. You drive over the viaduct at Hollywood, and it's those viaducts where you think, oh, please, goodness, don't let me have a flat tire here, of all places. And then when you peer over the side of that viaduct and you think to yourself, gosh, that's tragic down there. Somebody ought to do something about that. And then you drive past it and you look in the rearview mirror and you kind of think about it as you pass by, I suggest you cock that rearview mirror about 15 degrees so that you're looking at yourself and ask yourself, who is somebody? What do you mean somebody ought to do something about that? My suggestion is that the government has provenly woefully inadequate. Who is somebody ought to do something about that? Somebody is us. We have a responsibility. We are only as strong as the weakest among us, and we have a responsibility to get our sleeves rolled up and get into these communities and teach and mentor and love despite, not because of, and remind ourselves that if the first coming of Christ happened today rather than 2,000 years ago, that's where he would have been. He wouldn't have shown up at the rich, pretty people's houses. He would have he surrounded himself with stinky fishermen and reached out to prostitutes and loved the most downtrodden. And that's where he started his world. And that's where we came from. And if he came back today, if he came today, that's where he would be. He wouldn't be hanging out at the $100 dinners and the $50 lunches in the nice buildings in downtown. He would be where the need is greatest. And if we are truly called to be Christ-like, we have a responsibility to do the same. Listen, you are unallowed, in my mind, you are unallowed to sit and even discuss these topics if you're unwilling to get in and actually find out the truths about them. There are so many people that will sit around and talk about stuff and make decisions, especially those who are in government who make rules, but they don't have any reality about it because they've been unwilling to understand it. And all I'm saying is we have a responsibility to roll our sleeves up and understand what's going on and then attack it with a little bit of love. And the basic tenets that are in Against the Grain, in my mind, are a simple fix to a lot of the problems we have.
Bill, we've got to take a break, so listeners, stay tuned. You'll want to hear the second half of this interview. And this is Friday Viewpoint on Bott Radio Network.
We are in the air for good. Bott Radio Network.
Welcome back. I'm Pat McClerkin. This is Friday Viewpoint on Bott Radio Network, and I have Bill Courtney in the studio with me today. He has written an awesome book. You've got to run out today after this interview and buy it. It's called Against the Grain. He also has a documentary, which you can go online, and I'm going to let him, before the program's over, or ask him to give you all the information to go online and buy the book, buy the documentary. And there's a lot going on in your life, but we've been talking about the schools, but I want to talk about your business because, we're small business owners, and people that are not in business that think you have a business, they just think you have money, that it just works. You never struggle. But after I read your book, I could relate to that part of your life because it just didn't happen. It came with a lot of sacrifice, not only on your part, but your wife Lisa's part, your employees. You had some really loyal people, but you built a successful business. I'm sure you would give the credit to the Lord, but I love the way that in your book you talked about the word, you talked about a man's word, integrity, honesty, you talked about helping people to get out of their comfort zone, be the very best they could be, and you give some really good principles for running a business. And share with our listeners about how that came about and how you decided to start your own business and how all that's worked.
Well, in 2001, I started a business off my couch, and the short version is we sit now on a 50-acre manufacturing facility with our domestic sales offices in Memphis with 120 employees, have an office in Shanghai, China, one in Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam. We do about $45 million a year in sales, and that's a pretty cool story. But Against the Grain will explore throughout the book the 13 years coming up to that, like the day I had to lay off 60 people, and like the nights that I laid in bed wondering how I was going to explain to my wife and children that we were going to have to sell our house and start all over, and like the many days that I had loyal employees who needed help and how I could balance helping them and keeping the business going. And it is a struggle, but it's also an amazing blessing. But maybe more importantly is it's an awesome responsibility, because you know what? The same fundamentals of character, integrity, commitment, understanding the dignity of hard work, the scourge of entitlements, grace, forgiveness, legacy, all of the stuff that's in the book, those fundamentals are what took a football team from 7 wins and 93 losses and only 17 kids to 75 kids and 18 wins and 2 losses. It's the same fundamentals that's made my marriage go for 22 years and raised my 19, 18, 17, and 16-year-olds. And it's the same fundamentals that took this business from a couch to where it is today. And you know, the 30,000-foot view of Against the Grain is we can be an open-minded, inclusive, forward-thinking society without abandoning the core principles that got us here in the first place. And when people say, "Well, you coach football?" my standard answer is no. I coach kids who play football. I want to teach kids these fundamentals, and then the football comes easy. And when people say, "Well, you built a business," I said, "No, I built a group of people, and we have a business," because the same fundamentals that work in football work in business and work in family. And so, from my view, the truth is that we have got to make the conscious decision, and it is a decision, it's a voluntary response, on a daily basis, that we're going to commit to the stuff that matters. And when you do that and you illustrate that to players, to your children, to your grandchildren, to your spouse, to your employees, and you say, "This is the way I'm going to walk, and this is the way I'm going to act, and this is the way I'm going to conduct myself, and I want to surround myself with people who want to do the same," I really think business develops well. And I think football teams win, and I think families stay together. And that's the whole point of Against the Grain, is we've got to go against the grain of where society has kind of taken us. I know you want to ask another question, but real quick.
No, that's fine.
There are 10% of our country that are crazy, crazy, crazy far right. And there's 10% of our country that is crazy, crazy, crazy far left. And there's 80% of us in the middle who certainly have different thoughts and viewpoints on family and politics and religion and everything else. But those 80% in the middle are, by and large, have a ton of commonality. And the problem is society is telling us now that we have to go one way or the other, that we can't find common ground and commonality. And I'm saying this, the 80% in the middle can find common ground and commonality on integrity, on commitment, on understanding the dignity of hard work, on understanding all the tenets in Against the Grain. And can you imagine a country, can you imagine a business, can you imagine a team, can you imagine a family who says, "Yeah, we got different ideas about details and little things, but let's just create a foundation and base ourselves on those things, because they're all things we can agree on. And then every time a disagreement comes up, let's have an open-minded, civil, non-threatening conversation about how we're going to handle this problem or the next problem based on these fundamentals and this foundation." And things amazingly work out pretty well. And I just wish the people in D.C. would understand that.
I saw in your book how important that you felt that a man's word was, that you do what you say you're going to do. You
Period.
Follow through. And that's one of the principles, I think, probably that helped make you successful with your football team, because they could trust you. Now, not in the beginning. I'm sure they didn't. But they look at you with suspicion, and people do, and they want to be able to know that if you tell them something, it's true. But another thing that I really loved about your book was your commitment to marriage and the way you honored Lisa throughout the book, because for listeners that don't know what Lisa looks like, she's pretty cute.
Oh, listen, if any of you fish, it's that exciting feeling you get when you hook it, but you hadn't seen the fish coming out of the water yet, but you know you lit into a slab, and all you think is, don't let her off the hook. Well, when you look like me, which is fat and redheaded, and you light into a slab, you do whatever you can not to let her off the hook, and that starts with honoring her. So I learned that many years ago.
Well, she's pretty cute, and she has been a great helpmeet to you.
Oh, my goodness.
I dare say you could not have been where you are today without the Lord and without your wife. If you'd had a different wife, every day she would have been at the door. You're never home. You're never home. You never are here. We eat by ourselves every night. You care more about everybody else than you do us. But you didn't have that.
Sounds like you've been through that while a car business was being grown.
No, but because I worked right there along with him. But I know that's what happens in marriages because I've done a lot of biblical counseling. And I think from your book and from the way you've honored her, now I know there's been times when it's been really hard and things haven't gone.
Listen, it's not been roses all the way, and Lisa will be the first to tell you. And listen, I am a bouncing off the wall, doing about 100 things at a time person, and while it served me well and it's a blessing for the energy, it also can be pretty trying on those around you when you're like that, and I know that, and sometimes I was blind to it, and I caused my family some pain, and despite it all, my wife has stood by me always. And when I wanted to start, listen, when I started my business, I was 31 years old and making a lot of money. I'm not going to tell you the number, but big money, more than most people ever make. And we had a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, and just bought our dream home. And I said, you know what? I want to risk it all because I think I can build a business. Do you know how many 30-year-old wives with a nice car and a nice home and 4 babies in diapers would say, "Are you out of your mind?" And
about 95%.
And she looked at me and she said, "I trust you. Go for it." That's why Classic American exists. That's why 120 jobs have been created in this country. Had that not happened, I'd have never gone to Manassas because I wouldn't have been there. Had that not happened, we'd never won an Academy Award. Had that not happened, I wouldn't speak all over the country. Had that not happened, I wouldn't write against the grain. Had that not happened, we wouldn't be sitting here today. All because about 15 years ago, my wife looked at me with a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old to take care of, knowing it was going to take me 15 hours a day to get this thing going. And looked at me, and we were surrounded by blessings anyway, and looked at me and said, "I trust you, go for it." How do you not honor a human being like that?
Well, and also, and I would agree with that totally because and that's a great lesson, Bill, for people today because marriage is not something that people take seriously. It's people don't make that commitment.
It's not to having to hold in sickness and health unless you kind of in 5 or 6 years decide you're maybe not out of love anymore. I mean, it's just the lack of commitment. In the book, we talk about how important it is to follow through on everything you say. There's a whole chapter on it. But, I make the point right now, wherever your listeners are, if they're not in their home or wherever, your house could be burning down. And you might have insurance, but you can't keep your house from burning down. There could be someone stealing your car right now as we speak, and you might have car insurance, but you can't do the insurance and the things that we surround ourselves with gives us really a false sense of security. Because the truth is, you can't stop your house from burning down. God forbid someone in your family right now is being murdered or robbed. You really can't do anything about it. We have a police department, but that's a false. You can't stop. The point is, you have control over so very little in this world. And the only thing that I've thought about, that I've found that we have 100% control over in this world is our word. And when that's the only thing we truly do have control over, it just pains me to understand how cavalier so many of us are with our word. If that's the one thing you have control over, why is not that the one thing you absolutely invest everything in? I just don't get it.
One of the things I really want to talk about before we're out of time is define the difference between duty and responsibility. I love that part of the book because, there's one thing when we do things out of duty, especially in relationship to our children, it's not the same as when we do it out of responsibility. So define that in our last minute.
Duties are easily outlined. Responsibilities are for you to find. Someone can tell you your duty at work is to manage these 5 people and turn the lights on and off. But if something happens to one of the people or you see a problem, it may not be outlined in the specific duties, but you have a responsibility to do it. You have to understand the difference in duties and responsibilities. Duties are outlined for you. Responsibility is for you to take. Now, the amazing people that really accomplish stuff are the ones who handle both.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today, because it's been an enlightening experience for me. Reading the book was awesome. There were a lot of things in there that really spoke to me. And I want you to give the listeners your website, all the ways they can get on there and buy the book, buy the DVD, and how they can contact you.
So the DVD is Undefeated, won the Academy Award a couple years ago, and the book is Against the Grain, just out 3 weeks ago. And you can go to CoachBillCourtney.com to read more about both. And it's a national release, and so is the movie. And you on CoachBillCourtney.com, there's links to Amazon where you can order it, or you can go to Barnes & Noble or booksellers, or it's a national release. You can go anywhere books are sold. But to get a comprehensive look at everything, go to CoachBillCourtney.com. You can buy the book through Amazon. You can buy the DVD Undefeated through Amazon. And really, honestly, I've been very blessed in business. This isn't about a bunch of royalties for me. I want people to have a conversation about the tenets and against the grain and their families and their businesses and society, in hopes that it can maybe enrich people's lives.
I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I believe you're also available to speak to groups, to
I speak all over the country.
colleges, whatever.
I speak all over the country, and on CoachBillCourtney.com, there's 5 or 6 tabs for each individual thing. The last tab is called Contacts, and that will get you all the contact information for the team that handles all those things for me.
Coach Bill, thank you for being
Thanks
my
for having
guest
me.
today. And
So good to see you again.
It's great to see you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. So
Heck yes.
Stay tuned, and thank you for listening to Bott Radio Network.